establishment has established bridges of influence to the sitting president, the most important of which is the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR for short, headquartered in New York City with a branch in Washington. And of course, it's the subject of my book, The Shadows of Power, subtitled The Council on Foreign Relations and the American Decline. Now, how does the Council influence the president? We're going to talk about that. But first, I'd like to establish this. What is the goal of the Council on Foreign Relations? The goal is world government. And I'm just going to quote Admiral Chester Ward. He was former judge advocate of the U.S. Navy. He was invited into membership in the Council on Foreign Relations. He spent 16 years there, was shocked by what he found. Here's what he wrote. He said, the main purpose of the Council on Foreign Relations is promoting the disarmament of U.S. sovereignty and national independence and submergence into an all-powerful one world government. Well, from Boston, we have the Boston Herald up there. They even were bold enough to do an editorial against the Council on Foreign Relations, in which they call them foreign policy fuzzy thinkers who worship world government. And in my book, The Shadows of Power, I have many quotes, both from the critics and from the Council itself, demonstrating that they advocate the establishment of a world government. By the way, what do we mean by that? What do we mean by world government? Well, today, Brazil is run by the Brazilian government, right? And Japan runs, the Japanese government runs Japan. A world government would be a single government ruling the entire globe. European Union, you know, at one time, countries like Spain and England were mighty empires. Now they're becoming little more than provinces in the European Union. Their legislatures each year increasingly serve just to ratify decisions made by the European Commission in Brussels. And as you know, they're consolidating their currencies into the euro. They're consolidating their militaries. They say they're going to have a European Pentagon. They have a European Constitution. Europe right now is a model of global government on a regional scale. As we'll see tonight, the same thing is planned for North America. Now, the Journal of Foreign Policy for the Council of Foreign Relations is called Foreign Affairs. And I read every issue, well, I went through every issue before writing The Shadows of Power, going back to its original publication date of 1922, and I found many calls for world government. For example, in the first year of publication, 1922, we read this: obviously there's going to be no peace or prosperity for mankind so long as it remains divided into 50 or 60 independent states. The real problem today is that of world government. Let me underscore something that was said here. I found that these guys constantly use the words peace and prosperity to describe what world government will bring us. Professor Rudolf Rummel, Professor Emeritus of Political Science at the University of Hawaii, did an interesting study on death in the 20th century. And what he found that in that century, 4 times more people died at the hands of their own government than died in war. So it seems that there is something worse than war, which is totalitarian government. The question you got to ask is, if we have a world government, who's going to run it? Now, globalists will say, well, international coalitions are great. Look at how they stopped Saddam Hussein. What happens if Saddam Hussein runs your world government? You've got only one government on the earth. Where are you going to run to hide? There's no government now you can run to protect you. The Founding Fathers of America knew that it's very dangerous to put all power in one place. That's why they didn't just give us a president and the executive branch, but they also gave us a legislative branch, and even with that, there's a check and a balance, right, between the House and the Senate, plus the judicial branch to keep an eye on the other two. And I know that there's been corruption in all those branches of government, but nonetheless, that system has served to protect us from being taken over by a dictatorship. And by the way, in the original view of the framers, the states were supposed to counterbalance the power of the federal government, an issue that was sort of settled by the war between the states. James Madison, our 4th president, said this: the accumulation of all power in the same hands may be pronounced the very definition of tyranny. You can be sure if you accumulate all power in the world government, it will be the worst tyranny this planet has ever seen.